Dr. Danielle Harel and Celeste Hirschman are pioneers in intimacy, sexuality, and relationship coaching. They're the co founders of Somatica Institute. They've transformed how love and connection are taught through their experiential, science based Somatica method, which we will get into. Together, they've trained over 1,000 coaches and helped countless individuals and couples embrace vulnerability, rediscover desire, and create deeply fulfilling relationships. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having us.
Excited to be here.
Well, these are some of my favorite topics. And as I was talking about with you guys before, this is the perfect week for this with Valentine's Day. I think February is one that most people associate with either love, dating, relationships, sex, any of that. So we are here to bring the listeners topics of all of these things. I wanted to start because one of the things I talk about a lot on this podcast is I think it's so interesting in our society that anything else that we want to be good at or that we want to grow in, we study, we work really hard at, we continue our education. But for some reason, it seems to me like with dating, relationships, and sex, we kind of just have this expectation of let me meet the right person and then everything will be figured out. So I wanted to hear y'all's take on that. Do you have any experience with that with the clients that you work in? And why do you think that we operate that way in our society?
Of course, I feel like there's just this idea that you're just supposed to come ready-made to relationship, even though we get such poor training usually when we
Right.
and, you're just supposed to find the one and they're supposed to be perfect, all that fairy tale stuff, and it really gets in the way of people learning and exploring and finding out more about themselves and also, like, asking for what they want and instead of, like, just expecting somebody's gonna know, so it really gets in the way, and, as coaches, we know all of these things are learnable, and we really practice with our clients, to teach them these things experientially, so it's not just like talk, 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 it's very much like how do you practice those tools of intimacy so that people can get better at them?
Well, yeah, I know at the Somatica Institute, one of the main things you guys teach is that intimacy is a skill. So you mentioned the experiential piece of how you teach that. Can you tell listeners a little more about that and what that looks like?
Yeah, definitely. So we really take our I look at Somatica a little bit like Lego blocks, we like
Okay.
build foundations and you can build different kinds of or like words and sentences. You can like learn the letters and words and build
Right.
sentences and create. So when we practice with our clients, we practice all the tools. For example, like how do you know that you have a feeling? Okay, like how do you know where does feeling how do you recognize feelings in your body or in your nervous system? And then like how do you share feelings with someone?
Mm.
So we share them with each other. For example, I'm gonna say, Kelly, when I'm looking at you and you're sitting in this like you have this beautiful smile now that I said your name, it really made me my heart grow and kinda come out to you, and then you will say you're gonna be looking at me, and you're gonna say, "When you said that," and then fill in the blank if you wanna try it out with me right here.
So when you said that, that made me I felt very comfortable and very happy and excited to be talking to you guys, and it made me wanna dive deeper into this conversation.
Exactly. We just started the I feel game.
What is it called? The I feel game?
Yeah, we just
Okay.
yeah, but then what's beautiful about it is that sometimes you have, like, positive, heartwarming feelings, and sometimes you have a little bit more like, I don't know, I just feel anxious," or like, "I don't know, when I look at you and you're frowning, I feel scared." So you have a way to
Mhm.
kinda learn how to share feelings while practicing it with us, with the coaches, right, with us, and then or our coaches, we train many coaches, and I love calling it, like you practice with a kitten and then you go out and play with the tigers out
Oh,
there.
yeah. Well, you're making a great point about that, which is something I also wanted to talk about, the idea of practicing vulnerability with maybe someone outside of a relationship or maybe where the stakes aren't as high first, like to learn how to do it first, and I've had a lot of experience with that in my life, and when I started therapy, I did a lot of experiential work, and I learned how to communicate there to then be able to take that into my relationships, but I don't think I could have done it in the reverse way. Why is that? It just feels way scarier to me. But is there some sort of science behind why that works?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with attachment, right? Like once we get attached to someone, we get a lot more scared that if we
Mm.
do something wrong, they might leave or get mad at us or something like that. Whereas with a coach, you're just like, okay, I'm paying this person to learn something. We have an ongoing relationship, and that's the agreement, as opposed to like just vulnerably trying it with somebody who you're like trying to have a relationship with, where you might, you get scared of judgment or rejection.
Right, so the stakes are just higher in general.
Much higher. We work with a lot of people who maybe aren't that experienced erotically, or they really want to learn how to be better lovers. For example,
Okay.
a lot of times, like, I'll work with people who care so much about, like, what their partner is feeling and thinking, that they're just, like, all, like, worried and anxious when they're touching and connecting, and I really help them find that balance of, like, finding their own desire and touching in a way that's pleasurable
Mm.
them and their partner, right, to find that balance, and learning that in a safe container with boundaries where they get really honest feedback, because I think especially men often don't get good feedback from their partners. And then you can kind of teach them how to be much more subtle, attuned, but also passionate lovers.
Okay, I have about 4 questions that just came up from that statement. So when you're working with men versus women, do you see one more than another that's able to focus on their own needs versus their partners and then express them? Like, are men better at that? Are women better at that? Is it different for different people? What's the consistency there?
Yeah, so I really think, well, first we see kind of equal amount of men, women, and couples in our practice.
Okay.
But I think like people just have, because of the socialization and all the social messages we got, we have a little more tendencies. But
Mhm.
it's a little bit also personality. We're different. Some people really much more wanna like get what they want and don't want to teach anything on the way. Other people really, really want to learn. They really want to listen one step to like very attuned and really feel like they want to pay attention to what's happening with their partner and really give. And I think the best is when people match like that and there's someone who want to receive and someone want to give, but it's not always the case, right? So we help individuals and clients to navigate different people because people are different, and that's where like
Right.
the essence of where so many people kind of get you know challenging their relationship because they're like think that the other person's supposed to know who they are and supposed to know exactly how to give it to them, and we just want to say no, 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 like you need to teach someone how to love you and you want to learn how to love them because it's like how would you know, right?
Right. Well, often too, like you said earlier, we're not really taught. And so, how often are you seeing people not even know what they want? So, how could we communicate it? If we're not in tune with our own needs and feels like you were describing.
Exactly. So many people have no idea what they want for themselves, and we often start there. We're just like, getting into your own body, getting into your own desires, having some idea of talking about your fantasies and what really turns you on, what you actually want to happen, and what you just want to think inside of your brain. So there's so much subtlety to really helping people find out what they want for themselves.
Do you find that it's better to start someone when working with this kind of communication with, hey, I feel certain things and take it out of the sex arena? Or is it easier for people just to dive right into, this is what I want in the bedroom? Like they feel very different, and then maybe the bedroom can feel a little more overwhelming to me because it's not as talked about or as common in our world.
Yeah, I really think that it depends on the person. I think,
Mm.
again, because of socialization, I think many times people socialize as men going to come in and they'll be like, okay, I want to talk about sex. So sex will be
Right.
a good way to learn feelings. It's not
Oh,
gonna be like,
that's true.
start with sex. And then like, as we're going to learn and communicate and relate with each other around sex, we're going to also start to insert feeling statements or like, how did
Mhm.
that make you feel? And kind of like how to like explore feelings with a partner. And many times people who are like socialized women will come to us and they will be much more, oh, like I want to start with feelings and I want to feel comfortable. And we need to like help them like grow into be able to talk about sex for themselves first and then like maybe for their partner as well.
This is actually taking me back to what I was gonna ask you guys before we dove into the eroticism, but it works perfectly because I find in a lot of, my friends' relationships or my own relationships, the things that I hear about maybe would be, "Oh, we're not having sex anymore." Like, the complaints start there. And I've gotten really curious about that because I'm like, I don't think it really starts there. Like, there was all these things that happened in the past that have somehow made this block to where there's no sex happening. So, how important is it um, to really look at the whole picture within a relationship? I mean, I know some of the things that you guys do in your work talk about really working through the trauma piece of what comes up in relationship, or even learning how to have the ability to make repair with each other and the importance of that. So, can you touch on kind of all of those topics and what that leads to with our sex lives and relationship?
For sure, because sexless marriage can come from a lot of places, right?
Right.
So that's why in our training, we really teach both emotional and erotic skills because sometimes there's tons of emotional resentment and all of that needs to be worked through before people even want to have sex with each other again.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's the other way around. They have a beautiful, wonderful emotional connection, but this heat of the sex life isn't there. And then you need to find out like what really turns them on. Often people have not had those deeper conversations about what their core desires are, what we call core desires, which is what you want to feel during sex, and hottest sexual movies, which is what you want to do during sex.
Okay.
So we really have to have if it's not really about emotional resentment, if it's about the sexual connection and compatibility and learning each other in that way, then we need to dive into the erotic mind and into, the kinds of things that take us to the feelings that we wanna have.
Okay, so maybe
Sure.
start with learning how to do the feelings, communicating, working through whether it's trauma or I wanna actually go a little further on the repair piece because this has been something that's been coming up in my world a lot, and I think that we can look at this with friendships, with work relationships, any kind of dynamic of relationships. Repair to me has become the most valuable tool that I have learned as an adult in my relationships. Because 'cause we're not ever gonna agree with everyone, right? Like, 2 people should have different opinions on some things. That's healthy, I believe, and so if you're gonna have disagreements, the ability to make repair can actually deepen intimacy from what I've experienced. But you guys are the experts. So could you help the listeners understand just the importance of repair? And is what I'm saying accurate that it's is as important in a
Yeah.
relationship that I'm thinking it is?
Definitely. And I think repair is important in all relationships, as you said, not only in romantic relationships, it's important in relation with your children, with your friends, with your parents, with siblings, because as you said, people, it's not even, it's even like beyond disagreement, people just like being themselves, and then they trip on something that the other person is being their other self, right?
Right.
And like there's something that I said or did or didn't pay attention to really hit something in my partner or my kid or in my, someone else, my friend that is simmering there for a while for their own, like it's not even about me at all. It might have
Right.
been something that happened that not related to me and they just tripped on it, right? And that can also be something that, like we're not taught that, like we always feel like that's something about like we need to, it's something about like some one person needs to be right, but it
Mhm.
is not about right or wrong. It's just like I was being me, someone else was being themselves, and we kind of tripped on each other, right? So repair is a wonderful opportunity and a wonderful tool that we really kind of break down and teach a lot, both clients, both in our training, how to do it because there's like it when you learn and you have like an ethics of repair in your relationship, things can be smoothed up much more and it does bring much more depth and trust because you're just like, wow, like I was able to go with this person through this cycle. We
Mhm.
started with disconnect and now we are able to connect and it feels like much deeper and we can trust each other now, right?
Yes.
That's how it deepens trust and like really create longevity in relationship when you are practicing repair with each other.
And you
It's
also
really
brought up oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I
No,
well, I
go
was gonna
ahead.
you also brought up trauma, which I think,
Yeah.
when you're in the repair process, one of the things that you can discover and one way that you can deepen intimacy is sort of understanding what your partner's wounds are and what their
Mhm.
traumas are without a bunch of like, "Oh, there's something wrong with you or you're broken." We all have wounds, we all have traumas, so just normalizing that and saying, "Okay, so what are the things when I step on them? Like, what explodes inside of my partner? What is their history that impacts their feelings in the present moment about what we're talking about or what's happening?" Once we learn those things about each other, we won't always be able to avoid them, but we kind of understand, oh, that's why they're getting upset right now. A lot
Mhm.
of times it's like, what's the big deal? And it's like, well, the big deal isn't what's happening right now. The big deal is that it reminds me of this horrible thing that happened to me in the past. And when we can learn those things about our partner, we can have a lot more empathy and grace in those moments when the explosions happen.
You're using all the words that are popping into my mind because I was thinking when we do the repair, when we look at our partner in their trauma and go, "Oh," like, when we have that empathy for them and can see them through that lens, it does remove the need to get so defensive or angry, which I think is our go-to a lot of times because we weren't taught anything different. And I know, like, for me specifically, I'm in a relationship now where we have that capacity, and it's been the deepest intimacy that I've ever been able to build with someone because we can make repair when things come up. It's not that things don't come up. It's that when they come up, we're able to look at each other through an empathetic lens, take away the this is about me or personalization of things. And then that carries over into all other aspects of our relationship. So when people are doing these processes, I guess the point I'm trying to make for listeners is they're all so connected, right? And if we leave one piece out of that puzzle, we see it as, oh, we're not having sex anymore. But really, it's like the big circle of all those things we've just mentioned.
Yeah, so I think it might be.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a little bit stubborn here if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
It might be that that's I do think that, like, learning how to do repair in a relationship is super, super important, okay? Like,
Yeah.
kind of like foundational to be able to go deeper in the other places as well.
Right.
Learning because that teaches you that you can be vulnerable and that will be okay with someone else, that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to tiptoe around each other. You don't have to be perfect all the time. And like, but what also might happen, even if those things are ironed up and you have repair in the system, that you just have really different core desires.
Mhm.
Like different things turn you on, and that's another thing that we don't learn anywhere because we have an idea like, oh, exactly. Like if you love each other, you're immediately going to have great sex. But some people really love each other and have great repair and don't have resentment and they still don't have great sex
Uh,
because it's not a step. It's a good
yeah.
foundation, but it's not guarantee that they will have good sex because good sex require other tools in addition to those tools, which is really understanding that what turns you on and what turns me on might be different things and they might
Mhm.
not be compatible. And we spend many hours in the practices helping people break down all the details around what is it that turns them on and help to communicate, like really build a menu of like both the feelings they want to feel, which we call like, like literally core desires, and also like why bother having sex.
Right.
And also, and then like all the acts that go with it, but not only acts, maybe there are words that go with it. They're
Mhm.
like, like intentional touch that goes with it. And it can look very different than what we see in the movies. So we really help people expand the menu and help them look at sex as something that's like not such one size fits all, but very unique to who you are.
Well, you mentioned core desires. So, for the listeners, how do we figure out what our core desires are?
That's a great question. We spend a lot of time training training our coaches about that, writing books about it. We wrote Coming
Mhm.
Together that's all about how do you find your core desires. But so often it's actually like going into your fantasies or like the hottest sex you've ever had and really thinking like, what does this make me feel? And when I say what
Mhm.
does it make me feel, does it make me feel loved, adored, seen, punished? Degraded, right? Because there's all of those things can be really hot for people. And I think we have judgments. Oh, these are the good ones and these are the bad ones. But
Right.
honestly, really, when people are doing those things with agency and they're deciding like it really turns me on when I've been a bad girl and someone punishes me, to be able to, like, fully de-shamify that and ask for it and say exactly what kind of punishment feels the best for you, like, it can be quite specific. And so working with clients to get to the precision of what the real
Mm.
turn-ons are and then be able to shamelessly share them with a partner and think like, "Maybe my partner's gonna do this or not. Maybe they're gonna be able to or not, but at least I know what I want, and I can ask for it without shame, and I can also hear my partner's desires, which might be completely different than mine, and not, shame them but see, okay, so how do we find compatibility here? Because I know, like, sometimes people will come into my office and it's like 2 dominants or 2 submissives, and with 2 dominants, you see them, like, struggling, like, "Who's in charge?" And when it's 2 submissives, they're like, "Nobody never does anything." You have
Oh,
to work with sometimes. That's just, like, a very, like,
yeah.
understandable example of what can go wrong in this. You can fall completely in love with someone and then be like, "Uh-oh, there's no one doing anything here." Even
So that's what you're talking about when you say core desires can be contradicting like, they can be not compatible. What do you do if you find yourself in that situation, though? If you're thinking, "I love my husband so much, but our core desires are completely off." What do we do?
Yeah, so we have first we really work with them to try and see maybe there is some sort of compatibility they didn't think about. So we use a lot of creativity and see like, because sometimes it's okay if you fantasize about something, but touch in some way, but you keep playing the stuff in the back of your mind that
Mhm.
keeps you going. So we try to see if there are ways to find compatibility in ways that they did not think about, right? And like we got very creative over time. And I love it. For me, it's like a nice puzzle. It's like, okay, maybe you're gonna try and do this, and you're gonna try to do something else, and it can work together. But in addition, sometimes if that doesn't work, we tried all the bridging in the world and it didn't work. We try to see, okay, maybe you're gonna be okay taking turns. And one time we play movie, the other time we're gonna play the other person's movie. And that allows them to kind of get their sex some of the time, the sex that they want some of the time, and that might be enough. And then, and if that doesn't work, you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
she's pausing. Maybe it's not a compatible relationship. Am I reading that right?
Maybe it's not a compatible relationship. And then we start to be creative about other options that can be available. Sometimes people, find ways to outsource some of their desires. Sometimes they say, okay, I just want to be able to maybe talk my fantasies with you and maybe, like like watch porn or, you
Mhm.
know, some people want to open their relationship. Some people are born to be polyamorous and some people want to open their relationship because they want to play out their sexual movies in a way that really fulfills them. So and some people say, okay, this is a make it or break it for me and I don't want to live in that relationship. So, like all the options are possible and available. So we put them all on the table.
So you mentioned the word shame, and I'm thinking with some of these examples you've even given, I can't imagine that everyone would be able to tolerate those conversations. And then also the jealousy piece. So if people are listening and they're in long-term relationships, we had an expert on a couple weeks ago talking about how to fire up your relationship if you had been in a long-term relationship, things had gotten stale. How do you fire it up? But what if you're trying to fire it up? You're coming to these kind of conversations like you're saying, and someone's like, "Oh, I wanna introduce a third party," and the other person just loses it. How do you keep safety within the relationship while exploring your individual desires?
Right. I mean, I think some people can handle it and some people can't. And sometimes you need to do a lot of work. If you're opening your relationship, you need to do a lot of work to like reassure your partner. But again, it's not for everyone. Monogamy isn't for everyone. Polyamory isn't for everyone, and sometimes one person in a relationship is mono and the other one is poly, and that's actually quite challenging.
Sure.
But, again, we have worked with couples like that and tried to help them. Sometimes people really love each other and they really want to stay together and they're willing to be experimental and push and grow some of those edges that are more challenging in order to do that. And sometimes people are like, nope, that doesn't work for me.
Mhm.
For us, it's not like we don't have any judgment about what people choose. We really try to help them solve the problem in a way that works for both of them that feels right. And there can be lots of shame. Like one of the things we've really set up in our office is like if we're going to have one of these conversations where people are asking for something quite vulnerable and scary like that, to help to say like you don't have to sign up for anything that you don't want to sign up for. We're just going to have a conversation here. People are going to say what they want and then, really de-shamify it, but then say, but you still get to negotiate and decide together what works for you, whether it's a
Mhm.
particular desire or whether it's like a different relationship structure.
How does trauma tie into all of that too, though? I'm like going back to all of it and it just feels so connected to me. Like I find that sometimes I'm wondering if our sexual desires are even driven by the trauma we experienced in early childhood. Okay, you're saying yes. So can you talk more about
Yes.
that?
You got it, Kelly. Love it. Yes, it is. And I think that's the thing that people don't know, that we don't get to choose our desires. And I think it's also very de-shamifying when they start hearing like, I did not get to choose my life experiences. You did not get to choose your life experience. But those life experiences shape our turn ons because it's like if you think about, how kids play like, imaginary game when they're like
Mhm.
younger, right? So in our adult life, we play with sexuality as a way to really work out stuff that kind of like we did not resolve. And they created like the biggest template on our lives, on our emotional lives, right? So if someone experienced trauma, it is very likely that their turn ons are going to be somehow related to it. Okay. They might want to go and get away from the trauma and not play any near it at all. Okay. And they might want to not play with fantasies or just do some sort of like embodiment practices or like stay away from like direct physical touch, and they develop
Mhm.
some sort of like other practices, and we can talk a little bit about what would that can look like. And sometimes they really get excited. They're not getting so excited at the beginning because part of the work is to help them see the connection and to embrace, if they want to, the fantasies that might come up that might mimic the experiences that they had around trauma.
Mm.
But then now, when they get to play it out, if they choose to do it in that way, they have agency to do it. So they have the power to choose to do it and the power to say, like, now I want to stop." Like they get to play with different
Right.
kinds of aspects of the trauma. And that's what makes it so healing,
So
you know?
that's experiential, right? For anyone who still might not be processing. Like if you're actually living something out, it does rewire your brain. So in sex, I've never talked about this in this way, so this is very interesting to me, but in sex, is it that if something comes up as a desire and we go, "Wait, why am I thinking about that? Why am I fantasizing about that? That's something that happened to me forever ago." Is it a healing practice to then take your power back and live it out as an adult with a choice? Is that connected?
Yeah, so much healing can happen in erotic situations, and I think, so much of kind of BDSM and kink practices are
Mhm.
sort of founded on this idea, like, let's actually explore those darker sides of our erotic desires that might have been shaped by things that happened to us that were really bad, but now we're saying, "Okay, I'm in charge," right? Like,
Mm,
I'm gonna shape this the way that I want to with another consenting adult who cares about me and my feelings and my boundaries, and I'm gonna have a safe word, and we're gonna play with whatever it is, punishment or degradation or, whatever the play is that they wanna do, but they have choice and they have power in the situation, and there's something about that that's like, "That bad thing happened to me, but now I can reshape it." It's also
mhm.
really arousing, but I can reshape it in a way that's like, "This is for me. I'm taking this back. It's towards my pleasure, my orgasms, instead of towards someone else not caring about me and doing things to me that weren't good." It's like, now this becomes about me and for me.
Right. I could also see where that could be where the importance of communication with your partner, all of the stuff ahead of time, like, I feel all of those things that we talked about would be really important, and then also, if you are getting triggered by your partner's desires, maybe even having that awareness of, like, this is coming from their past, and, like, it's almost like I'm participating in a healing tool with them to help them do that, and maybe remove some of the judgment?
Yeah, 100%. I had a couple I worked with, and she was molested as a child, and her partner was the sweetest man ever. He just wanted to please her. He was so sweet, and she wanted to be used because it was
Mm,
part of the experience that she experienced. So, but now that turned her on. We worked on understanding where it's coming from, and that was very arousing for her. And he was just like, "Oh my God, I can't do it to you." It's like breaks my heart. I can't be the perpetrator. I cannot do repetition. And I was like, okay, let's explore now that we talked about it. And it's like now that you understand that she actually wants it and she can stop you in any moment if something doesn't feel good and you want to give her pleasure, let's see if there's a part of you that wanna be dominant. And wanna kinda play with your part with the parts of you that wanna, like, be in control. And he stepped into it, and they, like, had fantastic sex life after that part was described and, kinda broken into details, and of course, we workshopped some parts of it, you don't just, like, jump into a scene and you just understand, and that means you know how to do it perfectly, right? They're like
right.
stepping stones, so They needed to understand why it's happening. Then the next step would be like to see like how do you let's try a little segment and see if the tone is right. Let's make sure that you know when she's consenting and when she says that she's done. Like he needed to feel safe around that because he really didn't want to harm her. And then how do you keep playing it out? And we did like tried it out and workshopped and we got there. So
I'm curious, did her desire change after they actually lived it out a couple times, or did it always stay the same?
no, no, she wanted more and more of it.
Okay. I was
And
just
so
curious how our brains work because obviously, if that's how we had sex the first time or in childhood, maybe that is what we associate with the feel good emotions and all of that stuff. But then I just didn't know if it would change after we lived that out.
No, I think the healing comes from the agency,
Oh, okay. The
right?
taking your power back about it.
Yeah, exactly. This is my choice. And so, the sort of the erotic connections are already made, and that's going to be
Right.
where turn on comes from. But it's like now she gets to choose, and
Mhm.
then she feels really actually taken care of by her partner because he is you know, accepting and seeing what it is, even though, like, for her because it's kind of lonely if you think about it. If those are
Mhm.
your fantasies, if you wanna be used and then, your partner's coming with all this romance and sweetness and you're like, "That's wonderful, and I know how much you love me," but it's like, doesn't touch what I need,
Mhm.
then you feel alone and, like, misunderstood and maybe, like, a little bit ashamed that
Shame, yeah.
energies are on this sort of darker side of the spectrum. And when you can come out about them and you feel seen and you're have agency and your partner's giving you what you want, it's like this deep intimacy where you're
Mhm.
not alone in those thoughts anymore and you're not alone in those fantasies anymore.
That makes
and
total sense.
And not only that, what I see is actually people are willing to dive deeper and deeper into a
Mhm.
more and more, like intense experiences as they kind of feel safe with their partners to go there because they feel like, okay, I can, I can like dig deeper into that experience. And every time another layer is being kind of like healed, and healed doesn't mean don't want to play it. No, I want to play harder.
Right, right.
It's
Well, so I'm seeing now, obviously, how this would be very healing, like we said, and then also just like the pleasure piece of this. But is there also a connection between sexual fulfillment and physical health? Like, are there other things that we can gain from doing this kind of work and actually working with our partner to grow in these areas?
I have to tell you, Kelly, if I didn't have orgasms, I don't know how I would face life. Like
I could see that. Same.
balances, right? Right? Like, it,
Yes.
like, balances my hormones, releases all this oxytocin,
Chills
endorphins.
your nervous system out, all the things.
Yes. It's like, oh, I feel healthier and
Yes.
younger and happier when I'm having regular sex in my life, and, like, I'm a real miserable person if I'm not, because it does release all of those hormones. It's also, like, actually amazing exercise, and it just makes you feel more connected to yourself and also bonded with your partner.
How do we embody that? I know you guys talk a lot about the power of erotic embodiment. Do women struggle here more than men?
Definitely. I think women, again, like social messages again and
Yeah.
again, and we're supposed to
Yeah.
be the gatekeepers. We're not supposed to want to have sex. Sex is not exactly for us. It's mostly something that we give in exchange for stability in relationship. It's not even like it's not spoken so outwardly, but that's the
Mhm.
message behind the scene. And what it creates is kind of like, slut shaming, all those things. It creates disconnect between uh, women and their sexuality, and they really kind of keep it for this special relationship, this special moment, and they don't spend time cultivating it for themselves, for their own like well-being and pleasure, and for their own like kind of like like aliveness. So one of the practices that we really talk about and teach is decompartmentalization of sexuality, which is really
Okay.
kind of like taking all the sensations that you have, like learning to take in sensations and sounds and pleasure and touch and wind and nature and the way your clothes feel and the way the water on your body feels when you shower, like all kinds of embodiment practices that really teach people to take them deeply into their pelvic floor and into their genitals and to start to like feel the aliveness of their, pussy as the oracle. It's not like to feel the aliveness of the body, the erotic self, and not just like, our brains and not just our muscles, but like our genitals are like, my pussy has a lot of wisdom for me. She tells me when something feels good. She tells me if I enjoy something. She tells me what car to buy. She tells me what food I want to eat. She tells me, no, you don't want to connect with that person. Or say like, yeah, yeah, you really want to, So
Yeah.
she's my oracle. And we really work, especially with women, to embody this arousal and erotic self and not just keep it so, segmented just to the bedroom, just for the specific relationship they're in.
I love that compartmentalization piece too, because I feel like what you said is perfect. Like our society almost does this like slut shaming thing if you go to the extreme, but it's also because I don't know that we fully have grasped owning that power. Like it's not necessarily maybe to go just give it away to anybody, or it could be depending on what you are guided to do. But like maybe these practices of the embodiment piece and really like owning that part of our femininity, I've found like the older I've gotten, that is such a big part of the feminine power to embrace the erotic sides of us, or even to say things like, I don't know how I would live without an orgasm, like, because we're often like some of the messaging from my childhood, at least, is like, women can't really have orgasms or it's harder for women. And so we don't really know how to tap into that desire, that pleasure, that place. But when we do, it's interesting how it's so all connected in our lives. Like you were talking about, even when you're getting dressed, when you're walking in the wind flow, like just even in communication. So, do you see a difference in women who have embodied that versus maybe women who are still like, wait, what? This is, I'm having sex with my husband, but it's just so I can have sex with my husband and get him off my back kind of thing.
Well, I do think that there is this idea that we grew up with that having sex with people is giving something away, like something precious or special or important that we're supposed to keep. And when I have sex, I'm taking, I'm
Mm,
not giving anything away, no matter how many people or who I'm having sex with. I'm like, oh, I'm a generous lover. I'm not saying that I'm not, but this is for my pleasure. And I feel empowered when I'm having sex. And I feel like, oh, maybe you're done, but I've got a few more in there. Let's get those fingers. You know what I mean?
right.
So I do feel like if we go into sex as women where we're just like, "Oh, men are trying to take something away from us," and, it's like this struggle, and instead of like, "No, I wanna have sex for me because it feels good, because it gives me something," then there's nothing that we're giving away. We're just building our power center.
Right. And it goes back to it's then a choice, just like the healing aspects of like working through trauma within that. I think it is about taking your power back. Well, we mentioned this podcast will be coming out the week of Valentine's Day. And you had said before the podcast there were a couple things that maybe you could mention to the listeners of practices to incorporate around this holiday, or any tips that you guys might have for people looking to expand their eroticism or anything like that. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so we came up with amazing sexy bundles for both like people who want to do, like want to cultivate embodiment for themselves. We have like the spiritual bundle when you kind of learn how to bring embodiment into your body and kind of, build this decompartmentalization of sexuality. We have like bundles for couples to work and like learn each other's core desires and see what turns each other on, learn how to find what the hottest sexual movie is and like what kind of acts they want to have around it and kind of break it down to each other. We really teach in those classes. It's like it's a class that you can take on your phone and kind of share with your partner, and it's really fun because it's broken down. It's us talking and giving examples and demonstrating different kinds of tools like how to have conversations, how to talk about your core desires, how to find what turns you on, and then like really kind of working on all those aspects.
It actually sounds like a fun game to me.
Oh my god, totally like, "Let's play Core Desires today."
Exactly.
And I think there's 2 things that people can start to do right away, right now. One of them
Okay.
is their brain and one of them is their body. So as
Okay.
been talking about, one of them is to think, "What do I wanna feel during sex?" And if you need help with that, then we go much more deeply into it in the Core Desires class, but actually thinking about, like, what are the feelings that you wanna have?
Mm.
And the other piece is what Danielle was talking about, which is the embodiment piece. Start to notice what things in your life feel good in your body. Putting something in your mouth that tastes delicious, like a piece of chocolate or fruit, like feeling the bath water or the shower water like run down your body. Start to pay attention to your erotic mind and your physiological sensations of pleasure and arousal as like a way of life as opposed to just something that you're doing in the bedroom
Mhm.
separate from everything else, right? Like, so those are some things that I think people can start to heat up Valentine's Day right away, by just concentrating on those.
I love that because I feel like we go through our day without noticing any of that stuff, and all of those things are right at our fingertips to just go tap into, so that's a wonderful thing. You did mention that you guys have 3 different books, Making Love Real, Coming Together, and Confidence. So I will put those in the description of the podcast for you guys if you wanna go check those out. We've also mentioned the Somatica Institute, where I'll link as well for these bundle packages that you guys will be offering. But where else can people find you if they wanna keep up with your work?
Well, sometimes people wanna actually become coaches, and
Oh,
we train and certify coaches, so if you're like, "You know what? This sounds like so me, and I wanna help people in this arena," then yeah, somaticainstitute.com, you can become a coach and you can help people, and many people have changed their career because 'cause they're like, "This is what I've been wanting to do my whole life. I didn't even know it was a thing. I can't believe it's out there." So if you wanna become a coach, I think that's a great thing, and then, yeah, our website is just full of classes and also sexcoaching.com, if you wanna find a coach to work with one-on-one as opposed to just taking a class, then that's another option as well.
And you can follow us, on Instagram and TikTok if we're gonna have TikTok going on for us.
yeah.
We'll
TBD for
see.
everybody.
Yeah. Somatica Institute and, on Instagram and on YouTube, so you can find us and keep up with us. And those classes are on learn.somatica.com. And again, they're fun, short classes that really can teach you step by step how to do it all because we are experiential teachers. So I would love
Yeah.
people to really do it.
Well,
Yeah.
and just like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, it just feels like maybe we think we should just know, and there's no shame in not knowing. Like, we gotta just go find the tools or get the information we need.
Yeah, and I actually highly recommend the touch class because
Oh,
learning how to give good touch that makes you tingle all over your body and how to introduce touch to our most erotic areas is a subtle art that not everyone knows, so I think that's a great one for Valentine's Day too.
sounds like a really good Valentine's Day.
That's funny.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. I know the listeners love these topics when I have them on. So I really appreciate these conversations. I will put all of this information that we just listed in the description of this podcast for you guys. Go do a Valentine's Day bundle. Why not? What do you have to lose? It's the perfect time for that. Thank you again so much, you guys.